Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I attempt to answer your automotive questions. Now, I do a pretty good job at that, but I kind of suck at pronouncing people's names. So I apologize for that in advance if I accidentally mispronounce your name during the course of the questions. A few things before we get started. Firstly, I will be taking the questions from the Google Plus live event. There were links all over my social network that should lead you to that place. So if you're looking to get a question answered during the show, please post it to the Google Plus event. Now, after the event concludes, I will not be answering the questions that are posted there because, well, it'll be over. Also, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I cannot see the YouTube questions being posted during the show. Therefore, I will not be able to answer those questions as well. I know all these things I'm not doing. What I will do for you is I will say that if I don't get to your question today, or you just have general automotive questions, I would ask first that you check the description. I'm going to put some useful links down in there. But also that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. There's a wealth of information there that I've created as sort of a hub of a place where you can go and get help with any automotive issues that you might have. This is the last show that I will be doing in 2015, the last live show, I should say. We'll still have videos going up through. But after this one, going to wrap up the live shows. The next one will be on January 6th. Also, before I get started, special thanks to Sparkplug Gary for my cool new t-shirt that he sent me. Really like it. Apparently he does like salt flat racing and used some of my videos to help him out, which way cool. And I got this awesome t-shirt, so everybody's happy. Now on with the show and your automotive questions. Now I'm going to start by saying, Peter, I really appreciate your enthusiasm and your willingness to help other people. However, I will ask that you wait until after the show concludes before you start answering everybody's questions. Or if you feel like doing that type of thing, head over to my forum, join up. There's plenty of people over there with automotive questions that you could probably help with. Anyway, on with the show. Let's start with Stephen Bozo Jr. I have a 2000 Mitsubishi Galant, and when I accelerate and go up to about 3,000 RPMs and let go of the gas, the front of my car starts to feel like it's driving on a wavy street. I'm not sure if one of the cylinders are misfiring. Any ideas as to what this may be will be great. Thanks for everything you do, and Merry Christmas. Same to you. Okay, a few pieces of information would be helpful here. First of all, manual or automatic transmission would be good to know, because I'm struggling to decide whether you actually have an engine performance issue, or if you have, like, say, a transmission, or possibly a clutch, or possibly a driveline issue, or possibly an issue with, like, say, your tires or something. There's all kinds of things at play here, and without those little important bits of information, it's really difficult for me to give you an accurate answer as far as what might be causing that issue. So even though you say it's RPM related, like I said, I mean, it could be something with the driveline. It could be the transmission hanging in gear for whatever reason, because usually you experience misfires and things as you accelerate. So as you be accelerating up to 3,000 RPM, that's when you most likely experience the misfire. Something like what you're talking about after you've accelerated is something different in my eyes, and I wish I could give you more information on what that might be. But as I said, more information would be required for me to do that. Fred B has a 1998 Honda Accord 4-cylinder VTEC, broke a timing belt, and what are the odds that it also bent the valves? Should I just replace the belts and try to fire it up, or is there something else I should do first? To be honest, I've seen quite a few broken timing belts on that engine, and each and every time I do what you suggest. I put a timing belt on it and start it up and see if it's okay. And I've got to tell you, probably about 97% of the time it is okay. It's not an interference engine in my experience, so you should be okay. But even so, anytime you break a timing belt on an engine, I take this approach. Because you're going to have to replace the broken belt anyway. And this way you would know for sure if there's mechanical damage, and you wouldn't have to go through the trouble of removing the cylinder head and looking at the valves physically to find out if they were indeed bad. Like I said, you're going to have to replace the belt anyway. Replace the belt, try it out, see what happens. If you're lucky, well, you got a running engine again. And if not, well, you know what you got to do next, and you've already taken care of the timing belt side of things. Just throwing that out there. But that's how I deal with that situation. Jason Hardwick. Today's my son's birthday, so if you could give him a shout out, that would be cool. Well, I didn't see Alyssa's name, but happy birthday to your son. Okay, so I have a 2007 Scion TC with 130,000 miles that squeaks on cold days. It squeaks when it starts up for just a couple of seconds, only on cold days. Then it begins to rattle just a bit. I've been around the car thinking it was the fender liner and have been unsuccessful with that. I appreciate your input if you can. Thanks, Jason. Uh, any number of things could be causing squeaks, particularly in cold weather. In fact, it could be normal. I mean, really cold weather, my Element does that. It doesn't make any other squeak on startup at any other time, but one of the bearings on probably the idler pulley or something like that makes noise extremely cold days. And only for a few seconds and it goes away. Other times, it's fine. So this is a tough one, once again, without knowing exactly the nature, frequency of the noise, other than it being cold weather. It could be just your drive belt. It could be your drive belt getting old, or like I said, the bearings, perhaps on the tensioners. If it's only happening when cold, I'd be okay with it for now. However, the severity might dictate how imperative it is to explore it further. So that's where I'm kind of on the fence. It's always difficult. And then you got to rattle afterwards. That also, once again, I've written an extensive article about diagnosing and finding noises. There will be a link to that in the description. I would ask that you read that over and look through that. There's some videos in there and pictures and all kinds of stuff that could possibly clue you into what's happening, and if it's something really worth dealing with, or if it's just the cold weather affecting some of the older parts that you have on this thing. Yeah, but I wish you luck with that. But that article that I'm going to link down in the description, I'm sure will give you at least some insight as far as where to look and what to look for. David L. I guess you people are wising up. You're giving me easy names. Thank you for that, if that's the case. Has a Ford Taurus 2006. Anyway, the drum brakes on the rear wheels squeak something awful. It used to happen all the time. Now it mainly sits in colder, humid weather and only for the first stop. Is it normal? Also, low brake fluid light comes on, but I know the brake fluid isn't low. Happens every time now. Thank you. Okay, as far as brake noise, number one cause, in my experience, is the friction material being used. However, drum brakes take a really long time to wear out as opposed to like disc brakes. In fact, I've seen drum brakes last over 100,000 miles in the back of the vehicle without issue. That being said, something else that happens inside of drum brakes is over a period of time, there's sort of a dust buildup inside those brake drums. And many times what I do during course, like even if I'm doing a front brake job, a lot of times go to the back of the car and take a look at the rear brakes and see what's happening, if there's any other issues there. Rear brakes don't do the majority of the braking, but they're still important, especially to how the brake pedal feels with drum brakes in particular. That said, I might want to consider taking the drums off and cleaning it out. In fact, before you clean, grab a can of brake cleaner. I usually use spray brake cleaner, depending upon where you live, if it's available. It's not available everywhere, but you can pull the drum off just a little bit and put something underneath it to catch all the stuff that's going to come out. And the reason you do this and don't take the drum all the way off is because that dust that comes out is not good for you to breathe in. In fact, wearing a dust mask would not be beyond the realm of, reason. So you just pull the drum off a little bit, and you spray sort of on the inside of it, and you let all that stuff sort of drip out. Then you remove the drum completely, spray the inside a little bit more, and clean everything up. Clean the inside of the drum and put it all back together. Inspect the friction material. If it's full of like cracks or it's all glazed over, meaning that it's gotten kind of shiny, maybe even if you have enough friction material left, replace them. But use good quality friction material. I can't stress this enough. What the friction material is made from has a huge effect on its ability to eliminate noise down the road. Also, the hardware, all the little springs and things that hold those shoes into place and hold them down, that also goes a long way to help eliminate noises. And over time and heat cycles and things, that hardware just gets old and wears out. And it's generally a good practice to replace the hardware anytime you do drum brakes anyway. As I said, they last a really long time as it is, or at least they seem to me. And you might as well renew everything that's in there instead of having it go on for a longer period of time. I've done several videos on drum brakes and also drum brake adjustment, which if you're going to go through the trouble to do this cleaning, you might consider an adjustment as well. That could actually give you a better brake pedal feel in the end, and your parking brake would work better. Now, as far as your brake light coming on, there's two reasons why that happens. One is low brake fluid, as you pointed out. You check that, and that's okay. The other is it's connected to the parking brake assembly. So if you're having an issue with your parking brake, and I've seen this on some vehicles, to where it's not exactly applying the parking brake, but maybe a return spring or something has broken on the parking brake pedal, and it'll sort of hang down enough to cause that light to come on. An easy check for that is just to reach down and pull up on the pedal. If it's that type, it's the type that you step on. Just pull up on the pedal. If the light goes out, you may be looking at the problem right there, and then look into whatever return springs or whatever's supposed to cause that to come back up. I've also seen where cables get seized inside of the cable assembly, and you apply the brake once and it doesn't return because those brake cables are frozen inside of the cable assembly. So there's a few things to look at there, but as I said, you're either looking at something with the circuit with the brake fluid level. So even though it's topped off, there could be a problem with that sensor inside the master cylinder that turns the light on. That's also a possibility. So look around, see if there's any damage to those wires or anything like that. And yeah, also take a look at the parking brake assembly and see if there's anything that could be causing that there. Hope that's useful information for you. Let's see. Steve Z has a 1999 Chevy Lumina with a 3.1 liter engine. The engine loses about a quart of coolant every 300 miles, and there are no leaks under the car. Engine has 220,000 miles, but still has good power and no check engine light. The previous owner said he replaced the upper and lower intake manifold gaskets. The lower intake manifold gasket was actually broken and one part of the intake ports. But the replacement gasket didn't solve the coolant loss problem. The previous owner also said there was a coolant loss after the intake manifold gasket replacement. I've done a chemical test on the cooling system, and there are exhaust gases in the cooling system. How can I tell if this would be a bad intake manifold gasket or head gasket problem? Would a compression test detect a bad head gasket? Could this also be warped intake manifold or warped cylinder head? Thanks for your help. Excellent question, Steve. Okay, first of all, intake gasket leak cannot cause combustion gases to get into the coolant. It's before combustion ever happens. So it really can't be anything involving the intake. It has to be something that involves the cylinder. Now, a lot of people would just come right out of the gate and say you got a blown head gasket. And that is, quite honestly, the most likely cause. However, you mentioned a couple of other possible causes, which could be a warped cylinder head, or perhaps it could be a cracked block, or perhaps a cracked cylinder head. So all these things could contribute to combustion gases being in the coolant. In fact, I don't even tell customers if I run into this problem that they have a head gasket issue. I say, you have a combustion leak into the cooling system. That's how I describe it. And that way I'm covered in case there is a cracked cylinder head or a cracked block. And I bring this up in the course of that conversation also. So I don't just, say, yeah, you got a combustion leak in your cooling system. Good luck. that's not the way to go about it. No. From there, really, the only way to truly know is to disassemble the engine and inspect the head gasket and inspect the block in the cylinder head for trueness or any cracks or any other issues that might be there. Once again, the most common cause would be a head gasket failure. In fact, I believe that engine does have some issues with that from time to time, so that may very well be what you're dealing with. Compression test could possibly yield definitive evidence to that effect. Leak down even more so. Leak down test is similar to a compression test, except for I've got videos on this, links in the description after I get through with everything. But you run compressed air into the cylinder while it's at top dead center. If there is a combustion leak of some sort, you take the radiator cap off and you will see that compressed air, the bubbles coming out of the radiator. That would be clear definitive evidence. Compression test, yeah, maybe. It sort of depends. If you've got low compression on a cylinder, all you really know is you have low compression on a cylinder. It's difficult to tell where that compression is going. A leak down test is a lot more definitive. As I said, you'd see bubbles going into the cooling system, but honestly, you've already detected combustion gas into the coolant. So really, at this point, it's a matter of disassembling the engine, in my opinion. I don't think there's any need for any more testing. I think it's time to tear it down and have a look. Good luck. Next we have, see, this is the issue, Peter. A lot of people are responding to your responses to them, and it's difficult for me to figure out who's actually asking questions or responding to you. So like I said, if you could just refrain until after the show is over. Okay, Thomas Campbell, when installing new hub assembly, should you grease the bearings or can you just put it straight on? Hub assemblies in particular are designed, they're sealed units. So unless you have special instructions that say use lubricant A, or it comes with lubricant in the packaging, leave it alone. Just put it on. It was put together at the factory with the proper lubricant. If you start mixing lubricants, if you put a different type of lubricant in than what they put in when they made the part, there could be a weird chemical reaction and bad things could happen. So you don't want to do that. Just take the assembly and install it unless there are special instructions telling you to do otherwise. Let's see, Taylor W. Hey, Eric, first off, thank you for everything you do. You're welcome. Thank you for that comment. Excuse me. I wouldn't feel right if I wasn't learning something new about cars every Friday from you. Thank you. My question pertains to an 07 Honda Civic R18A. I'm hunting down a rough idle. I've bled any air out of the cooling system and replaced some Bosch plugs with NGK ones. Good job. I checked for vacuum leaks just in case, but I didn't find any. These engines don't have IAC valves, so I was wondering if there was any other direction you might be able to point me in. It does have some way of controlling the idle. And 07, I'm struggling here. The only thing I can think is like a throttle, an electronically actuated throttle that could be being held open by the computer in order to maintain an idle, because there has to be some way to maintain an idle. There has to be some way to bypass the throttle plate so that you can maintain idle, especially when you turn on things like air conditioning or extra electrical loads. It has to be able to deal with these things. That said, and I hate saying this because there are so many people in my forum, and I get emails about this all the time. I removed my throttle body and I cleaned it, and now my car doesn't run right. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that, oh man, I wouldn't be doing these shows right now, I'll tell you that. All right, make sure the engine is off. Like take the key out of the ignition and everything. Do not remove the throttle body. I do not recommend removing throttle bodies to do the cleaning, because that seems to coincide with my car no longer runs or idles or does anything now that ever since I cleaned my throttle body. Try cleaning the throttle body and see if that gives you any traction. There are several other things. I mean, it's still a solid valve train, so misadjusted valves and valves. Honestly, the valves on Hondas, even though they're adjustable, don't often go out of adjustment, at least to a point where they cause an issue. It's very rare. Normally what I see is people go in and adjust the valves and they don't do it properly, and that causes the problem. That's what I see more than them actually getting worn to the point where they don't work anymore, or they're causing some sort of idle issue. But it's usually somebody else that goes in there, and maybe they're not as practiced at it. And it does take some practice. I've been doing it for years, and I still don't get it right every time, because it's a really refined skill, and it is a skill. It is something that you can only learn by doing it a bunch of times and screwing it up enough times to where you have to go back in and redo them. And I've screwed up enough times and had to go back and redo them. So I've got extensive experience adjusting valves, and I could say that, you know, for the most part, they don't really go out, but it is a possibility here. It's one of the things. I've also written an article extensively about Honda idle issues. It sounds like you read part of it because you did check for air in the cooling system, because that's one of the things that can cause a problem. All that being said, you get to a point where you've hit on all the things that could be engine performance related. You also talked about vacuum leaks. Well done. But you get to a point where you have addressed all of these issues that could possibly cause the problem. Excuse me. The very bottom of the list, engine mounts. After a while, engine mounts get old. Some engine mounts on Hondas are vacuum controlled, and if the vacuum leaks or the engine mount goes bad, then this can cause the engine, or you'll feel more of the vibrations from the engine. But I go there as the last step. I address engine performance first whenever I'm dealing with idle issues, and then down at the bottom of the list is the engine mounts. And if it has a manual transmission, engine mounts tend to get a little more abused with manual transmissions because there's a lot more shock loads to them as a result of it being a manual transmission. So eliminate engine performance issues, use that article if you haven't already, and then look to engine mounts at the very end. Okay. Okay. Taylor W., same person. On a separate problem, a lot of the time when slowing down to a stop, I push the clutch in, the engine will stumble like it wants to die, and the RPM will drop below 500 when it recovers. But it recovers and never stalls. That's not going to be valves. That's not going to be misadjusted valves or anything like that. That's some kind of electronic control. Try cleaning that throttle body, see if that helps. and start with that. But I'm surprised you don't have a check engine light or something with that going on. But well done on putting the NGK plugs in, taking the Bosches out. I mean, you've got a good start on it. Like I said, well, and that's not going to be engine mounts either. That's going to be something else. It's too bad you don't have a check engine light to help direct you in the proper direction. But I mean, everything you're describing sounds like idle air control valve issue is what it sounds like. So something in there with control is messed up. And if you say it doesn't have an idle air control valve, then I'm somewhat at a loss as to what you tell you. Adam, the car guy. Hey, Eric, the car guy. I have a 2003 Honda Element and it's on recall because of the airbag. Do you think instead of taking it to the dealership, I can do it myself? Because I don't know where to buy the airbag to replace it. You are the best #1 auto mechanic channel on YouTube. Thank you very much. You cannot perform the recall. And it's something that's attached to the VIN number of the vehicle and everything. You have to take it to the dealer to have them do it. And aside from that, it's not the airbag they're replacing. They're just replacing the inflator, which is attached to the back of the airbag. So there's the airbag assembly, and then there's the inflator assembly attached to the back of it that they're replacing. So when you go in to get these airbag replacements done, don't expect to have like a brand new airbag. So if you got like a screwed up airbag in your steering wheel and you're thinking you're going to get a new one, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to remove that, take the old inflator off the back, put a new one on, put it back together, away you go. That's how it's done. So in other words, Adam, you can't do it. Take it to the dealer and have them do it. It's part of the recall. It's if you've gotten the recall notice, have them do it, because you won't be able to go through and verifying the VIN and everything else and the way it's all put together. Just have them do it is the best way to go about it. Brendan W. I thought I would throw a misfire question at you. 87 Nissan V6. Oh, cool. Appears to be missing on the #3 cylinder. Plugged look white compared to the others. I replaced all the obvious ignition parts, done an injector balance test and a leak down test, and then did a crank and compression test. And guess what? #3 was actually higher than the rest. That's interesting. Above the max spec, in fact. Could carbon buildup cause this much of a compression increase, and would that be enough to cause a misfire? Thanks for everything you do. Looking forward to your responses. First, I will say, well done on your diagnosis up to this point and looking at something mechanical. So often people come to me with engine performance issues and completely ignore the fact that the engine is a mechanical device, and if there's a mechanical problem, it will cause all kinds of issues, including performance issues. And it seems that people have a tendency to go after electronic components because they think electronics are evil and they must be the cause of all problems. No, it's not that way. And the fact that you have white on the plug, I'm thinking it's burning oil in that cylinder. And since it's only happening on the one cylinder, I'm wondering if you've got oil control ring problems on that cylinder because your compression was so high. If you had low compression, then I could say, well, maybe that cylinder's worn out, but you've got high compression, which is weird. And the only thing I can think to cause that is some type of buildup, as you surmised. So the oil control rings are designed to scrape any oil that's on the cylinder walls down and run them through oil return holes on the inside of the piston. So the oil goes in those oil control rings, through those oil return holes, down the piston skirt, back into the crankcase. If those oil return holes, and this is what I find, it's not so much the rings that are the problem, it's the oil return holes. Toyota's 4-cylinders were really famous for this. Those oil return holes get clogged up, that oil's got nowhere to go. So it fills up the oil control ring and then just slips right past into the combustion chamber. White plugs, or a white powdery substance on plugs, is normally oil burning. In fact, I posted an Instagram a few weeks ago about that very thing. I found a vehicle that was burning oil, and you just see this crusty whitish buildup on the spark plugs. That is a good indication something's going around there. So you do have an issue on cylinder #3. It could be, like I say, oil control rings. It'd be great if you had a borescope so you can look down in there and see if there's like a bunch of crusty buildup on top of the piston. But yeah, I'm thinking the spark plug's probably firing if it's got some residue on it. And fuel, it's hard to say, but if you've got that much oil in a cylinder, that will offset the mixture and cause that misfire that you're talking about, and that buildup will continue. So it sounds to me like you got a mechanical issue, and it sounds to me obviously like it's on cylinder #3. As I said, a borescope so you can put your eyeball on it would be great. Next best thing to that is to disassemble the engine and take a look down in there, as much as I hate to say that. And I don't know have any cure for that without doing engine disassembly. If you wanted to try it, maybe you could try a mixture of acetone and automatic transmission fluid and just put that down under the cylinder and leave it in there overnight. And don't fill it all the way up because you'll hydrolock it. And actually, just to be on the safe side, you should leave the plug out and disable the ignition system and crank it for a little bit before you put the plug back in, just to ensure that you don't have enough in there, because a liquid in the combustion chamber can bend connecting rods. That's what happens when you drive through deep puddles and you get water sucked into the engine. Your engine may still run, but liquids aren't compressible and connecting rods will bend. I've seen it, or break. So you don't want to have like a bunch of oil inside there, or that mixture I told you about. And you can do it about 50-50. Do automatic transmission fluid and acetone, just to see if that can work those rings loose. If nothing else, it'll probably, help erode away some of that buildup that's already in there. All right. Let's see. Alex Vask, a 97 Subaru Legacy, 200,000 miles last week. My car started idling at a very low RPM, would not move at all when I lifted up on the brake pedal until I hit the accelerator. The biggest big hesitation when accelerating. Parked it at the AT oil temp light started flashing a few times. When I started it back up, everything seemed back to normal. Checked the AT fluid level. It was okay. I replaced the fluid myself 6 months ago using your video. There's some sort of a secret handshake to get the AT stored code. I've tried a few times. I can't seem to get the AT oil temp light to flash any code. Also, checked with the code reader. No code. Any ideas? Thanks. By the way, I miss your Subaru. I miss it too, actually. I kind of like that car. Although I really wish it was a turbo. That would have been nice. Okay, on to your problem. Does sound automatic transmission related. The automatic temperature light will not set a check engine light. And you have a 97, so you should be able to pull codes on that, but not all code readers can pull transmission codes. So that may be an issue, but I don't think that the automatic transmission temperature light would cause the check engine light to come on necessarily. It's sort of like, when your car overheats and that little idiot light for that comes on and your car's overheating. This is just telling you about the automatic transmission. Now, Subaru transmissions, being all-wheel drive vehicles like they are, if I remember correctly, I did some research when I had my hesitation in my car. And there is a clutch inside the transmission that transfers power for front and rear wheels. I'm kind of wondering, and it's common for this to wear out and have issues, I've found in my research. And I'm wondering if perhaps you might have a problem with that. And the problem is actually internal to the transmission. And really the only way to go is to have it repaired or replace it. And that's just a guess on my part. I don't really have any evidence to support that, what you described, other than the fact that you've got an overheat condition. It sounds like you checked the fluid level. What you could try is replacing the fluid in the filter just for good measure, just to see if that cures the problem, it gets better or worse, and see what happens from there. Other than that, well, you said you replaced the fluid 6 months ago using my video. Other than that, you may be looking at an internal transmission problem. And really the best way to diagnose those types of transmission problems is with a set of pressure gauges. On the outside of automatic transmission, automatic transmissions, few people know about this. There are different pressure ports, and you can hook up pressure gauges to these ports. And in the service manual, it tells you what pressure you should see when the vehicle is in a given gear. And that's how automatic transmission diagnosis is normally done. And most people don't have access to those pressure gauges. They're really oil pressure gauges, and sometimes they use special fittings in order to tap in there. But you get a chance to directly look at the pressures inside the transmission, because that's how an automatic transmission works. It works on the pressures within it, and it activates all the valves and everything in order for gears and clutches and bands and that kind of thing to either engage or disengage to make the automatic transmission work. And then there's also electronic devices that come into play in many modern transmissions, but still, it all works on pressure. So electronic devices are just directing pressure from one place to another. So if there's leaks or if there's clutches or things like that that burn out, transmission heats up and you possibly get the issues that you have there. So obviously a transmission problem, you've already tried the last ditch hope effort thing, you may be looking at a transmission. You might try salvage yard, or if you can get your hands on a reman. I mean, it depends on what kind of condition the car's in. It is a 97. It does have 200,000 miles on it. So ask yourself, how much you're willing to invest. But I say the best transmissions are the remanufactured ones, because they've been dyno tested and everything else, so they should be. And that means that you'll have less issues down the road. Okay, moving on. Christopher Maltias. Yeah, sorry. My mom bought her 2014 Honda Fit at the dealer last week, and when she got it back, the RPM went to 4,000 instead of the usual 3,300-ish as usual. When she brought it back, they said there was nothing wrong, but it got back to normal. What could have happened there? Not a clue, especially if they drove it and they said it was usual. I'm assuming you're talking about when it shifts. And the shifting depends on many different factors. The computer takes a lot of stuff into account, including how far you're into the throttle, how much of an engine load there is, many things to dictate when it's going to shift. The difference between 4,000 and 3,300 is, I don't know if that's significant. And the people at the dealer didn't think it was significant. And if you don't have to check engine lights or anything, 2014s are pretty quick to set check engine light if there's any kind of issues. I would say it was normal operation just like them and move on with life. We're already at a half hour and I'm just cruising along. So usually at this part of the show, I jump in and try to answer questions that have recently been posted. I usually start at the bottom, work my way up. Let's see. Vito Alonso. Hey, Eric, not sure if you'll make it here, but quick question. If you have a car that's been sitting for over 2 years, what do you recommend as must-dos for getting it running in original performance? I actually did a video about cars that sit, and my Acura Vigor was one of those cars, obviously, that sat under a pine tree, which is the worst thing you can do to it. Okay, first thing is you don't want to start the engine up like right away. I pull the plugs, sometimes squirt a little oil down into the cylinders, disable the ignition and the fuel, and just crank the engine for a bit. I also check the oil and make sure it's good and change it. It's not going to hurt to change it. But you want to develop oil pressure, because after 2 years, if the engine hasn't run, all that oil is completely off of all the engine parts. And normally when you're driving around a vehicle on a daily basis, there's a little bit of oil residue left on just about everything. And it takes a significant amount of time for that to go away. And 2 years is enough time for all that lubrication to go away. So therefore, you want to do what you can to try to prime the engine and get as much oil circulating before you actually start it up and run it. Because metal-to-metal contact is what's going to wear the engine that much faster. So you could almost destroy the engine starting it up like that. Also, tires. You're probably going to need to replace them. And the other thing about vehicles that sit for long periods of time is all the rubber, everything, the gaskets, the bushings, all that stuff gets dry rotted. Even worse if it's outside and it's sitting above the ground. If it's outside on a driveway, it's better than sitting above just the regular ground, because the regular ground, the corrosion just happens everywhere, and it's going to eat a lot of things and do some not so nice things. But mainly my concern is for the engine and making sure that you don't just start it right up after sitting for that long. You want to make sure to get some oil up through there. I'm trying to think of what else to tell you. Really just have to deal with whatever issues come up, because there probably will be issues. And in my experience, cars that sit actually wear out and have more problems than cars that get driven every day. I mean, cars that have 500,000 miles on them and a car that sat for 5 years, I say the car with 500,000 miles on it is probably going to fare better than the one that sat for 5 years. Just been my experience. But either way, I wish you luck with that. Okay. All right, Michael Stackinson. He's a regular viewer, and I'll answer his question. Hey, Eric, I may have mentioned this before in some of your other videos, but I recently upgraded my 2006 Honda Pilot to the Motor Fiend Cree LED headlights, same ones I have in my Acura Vigor. Got a video about that. I thought it was a good deal for what the kits were worth. My question for you is, do you think these are better than the HIDs you installed in the Element and your Odyssey van? And what do you think are the best quality headlight upgrades on the market these days for a vehicle? First of all, I can't even broach this topic without all the controversy about putting, HIDs and projector beam housings and all the kind of stuff that goes with that. That is a valid point. And anytime you're going to upgrade your lighting system to be more intense, it's imperative that you make sure that the headlights are aimed correctly. Also, that you're not putting yourself in a position to where you're a danger to other drivers on the road. In fact, I'm considering putting projector beams in my Element for those HIDs as it is. Now, in my experience, having run both the Crees and the HIDs, the Crees were just easier, and they've been easier. I haven't had problems with either one, but the HIDs, there seems to be more involved. Also, the voltage that they run on and everything else seems to be, HIDs seem to be going out of vogue. From what I'm seeing. I mean, it's not that they don't still have a place. It's just, I don't, the LEDs seem to be taking over everything. And I think the reason for that is because the price of LEDs have dropped precipitously over the past few years. I think in the past 7 years or so, the price of LEDs has dropped something like 80%. So that's why we're seeing a whole lot more of them. And in fact, daytime running lights now and just about everything are LEDs and all the taillights and all that other stuff. So, and LEDs use a lot less power. So, and personally, I like LEDs. I'm not saying that HIDs are bad. I'm not saying that HIDs can't be used. But what I will say is I will reiterate once again that if you are going to upgrade your lighting system with brighter lights such as HIDs or something like that, seriously consider doing the projector beams, and also check your local laws to see if it's even possible for you to do it, because I got a lot of feedback from a lot of people on that said that it wasn't legal to run lights of that type or modifying your lights in any way, shape, or form. So that's something to certainly be considered. So yeah, think of other people on the road. Oh, let's see. Wow, a lot of people throwing things in the last minute here. Let's see. Trying to read these quickly to see if I can be of any help. All right, Tyler Book. Hey, Eric, thanks for all the videos. Learned quite a bit from them. That said, I'm stumped at the moment. 2006 Mazda 3 makes a sound kind of like a rattle from the passenger side rear corner, only for the first minute or two of driving until the brakes are applied a couple of times. Does not make the noise at all under braking, then returns when the pedal is released. On inspection, I found a broken shock bushing on that side, so I replaced both shocks, but the noise persisted. I found nothing else loose on that corner, but the brakes are nearly new. I'm leaning towards a wheel bearing going bad, but there's no play in the wheel, and I'm checking for a bad bearing, so I'm not sure. Any thoughts on the subject? First of all, I'm going to say it's not a wheel bearing. Wheel bearings don't make that type of noise. Wheel bearings make low groaning type noises that you hear on the road, and when you hear the noise, you won't feel any play. So the noise that you're describing sounds like brake noise, and if you've just put brakes on, they're suspect, I would say, or possibly the installation. The anti-rattle clips, all those other things that go in there go a long way to help keeping things quiet. Also, the friction material used. You say that. Let me just reread this. The noise rear corner for a minute or two of driving until the brakes are applied a couple of times. So after applying the brakes a couple of times, it goes away. I say the problem's in the brakes somewhere, somehow. And I've got videos about servicing brakes, and you have to make sure you use proper lubricants. And that, once again, that hardware that's on the outside goes a long way towards keeping things quiet. That's right. I wouldn't be looking so much for suspension stuff, although good find on the shocks. It doesn't sound suspension related. It doesn't sound wheel bearing related. It sounds something with the brakes. Also, link in the description to an article I did about noises, and one specifically on brakes, which has a whole section on dealing with brake noise. Oh, here's a Mustang. Tim Phillips. Hey, Eric, longtime fan. I wanted to say happy holidays to you and your family, and happy belated birthday. Thank you for that, and right back at you. So if it's your birthday, happy birthday. I've got a 1995 Ford Mustang GT with an old 5-liter V8 similar to your 1982 one, except mine's making either a knocking or rattling sound when at low RPM while driving. It's the original motor as far as I can tell, and it's got over 140,000 miles on it. What's the issue with it, and should I be worried that it'll give up the ghost in the near future? Simple test: oil pressure. Oil pressure, if you've got a noise, particularly in the bottom end of the engine, oil pressure is created by the clearances between all the moving parts on the bottom end of the engine. I've done a video about this whole thing. So if you have an engine noise and you hook up an oil pressure gauge and you find that the needle fluctuates quite a bit, or the needle fluctuates along with the noise, I've seen that quite a bit. So every time you hear the noise, you see the needle move, you got a problem at the bottom end of the engine, and you probably should get in there and take it apart and find out what's going on. It's a good excuse to do upgrades. You got a 95 Mustang GT, so and you have so many options. Trust me, I've been doing tons of research for the Fairmont project, and I know a lot about small block Fords right now and the kind of things you can and cannot do to them. Or just heck with it, just upgrade to a 351 and be done with it. Either way, I would start with an oil pressure test. I've got a video on that very thing. Put a link to that in the description. Give me a few minutes to put that stuff together. All right, we'll motor along. Last show of the year. Give you some extra. I always try to give you a little bit extra. All right, Far Hudkins has a 2006 PT Cruiser Turbo. Yeah, I know, a pain to work on. I'm so sorry. With just over 101,000 miles, check engine light is on. Code indicates power steering fluid pressure sensor fault. No problem with engine stalling, though it does idle a bit rough. False flag. Thanks for everything you do. The ETCG community is great, and happy holidays. Happy holidays to you as well. ETCG community is great. So if I don't answer your question, stop over to the forum and see how great our community actually is. All right, you have a code for a power steering pressure sensor, and this can cause issues with idle because, as I mentioned earlier, the computer takes inputs from all different things, air conditioning, or if you've got the steering wheel turned all the way to one side, thus putting a load on the engine. So the computer corrects for this. Anytime you got a fault, you got to track it down. And I can't say exactly where that fault is. It could be that switch. It could be the wiring to the switch. It could be the connector. Could be something weird inside the computer. I'm honestly not exactly sure what is causing that, but I can see a correlation or a connection between a power steering switch like that and a problem with your idle. So yes, you could be getting false information. Bad things could be happening in there. Let's see. Pope J, his Nissan D40 2010 steers a little to the right. I have my wheels aligned, camber, toe done by Nissan, and still steers a little to the right. And clueless as to what causes this. Something I noticed when I replaced my brake pads is uneven wear on the outside is thinner than the inside pads. Does this contribute to that? What should I do to check it? Yes and no, because if you do have a caliper that's hanging up, it can cause the vehicle to pull to one side. And what you describe is a caliper that's hanging up. It sounds like, you know, the slide pins or something like that might not be allowing it to release like it's supposed to. And usually that's what I find whenever there's an issue with brakes to where they're not releasing properly, that's the type of wear I see, just uneven pad wear, either too much at the top or back on one side, or just depends on what's sticking or hanging up. Got a video on doing a brake service that would be helpful to you. I insist on using silicone paste on caliper slides and not using petroleum-based products. So yeah, try a good brake service. But the other thing is your tires. The tires can cause a vehicle to pull to one side or the other, and to eliminate this as a possibility, rotate your tires front to back. If the issue goes away or changes in some way, then you know the issue is the tire. But one of the first things I check for whenever somebody's talking about a vehicle pulling to one side or the other is the tires. So that's where I would look. And you're correct in looking at the brakes also, as you know, brakes that are hanging up can cause the vehicle to pull to one side or the other as well. But check both sides. Don't just service one side, service both sides. And why not do all four wheels? What the heck? All right. I'm going to do one more, and this will be totally random. How about we take the last person that posted a question? It's hard to find them because now I just messed it all up. Oh, all right. Herschel Hendren. Hey, Eric. Hi, Eric, and happy holidays. Happy holidays to you too, Herschel. I'm working on a 2004 GMC Yukon with a bad Blendora motor, and it is the one that controls the defrost to the front vents that someone tried to fix before, and they took the cog gear off with the Blendora actuator, and not sure why, since it doesn't need to be removed to replace. But now I'm trying to get this cog gear back in place and have the actuator work properly. It's killing me. Any ideas to help would be great. Thank you very much, and have a nice Christmas. Now, I haven't dealt with that issue directly, but you know, and in fact, it's hard to even envision what you're dealing with, other than, you know, I know it's a motor inside there and has gears that are supposed to activate things, but that's awfully weird that they did what they did. I'm a little confused by that myself. Man, I feel like I'm striking out on this one, and I hate to. On the last question I was going to answer, I can't think of any kind of. In fact, I'm trying to picture the setup in my head, and I can't do that either. I guess it's just something fiddly that you're going to have to deal with. If I had pictures, if I had some other information besides just your words, it might be able to help. Unfortunately, I can't, and I'm very sorry for that. All right, well, with that, I am going to close this out. We took in an extra 15 minutes, and I hope that extra 15 minutes provided additional information to you. And once again, this is the last show of the year, so my next show will not be until January 6, 2016. Pretty cool, huh? Last live show. There will still be videos throughout. I'm taking a little break starting next week, and therefore I won't be available on social networking or my forum or stuff, but you'll still get normal video posts and all that stuff. So if you watch this video and you're an avid watcher of Eric the Car Guy, know that you're still going to get plenty of videos. In fact, you're going to get a lot of videos in the next few weeks. I've saved up. So hopefully you'll have plenty to watch from Eric the Car Guy now and into next year. Oh, I think you're going to like what you're going to get. Anyway, if I did not get to your question, I apologize. Questions posted to the Google Plus event after things are concluded. I won't be answering those, obviously. And once again, I won't be answering the YouTube comments that will be posted to this video. Apologies for that. However, EricTheCarGuy.com, please, EricTheCarGuy.com, always available to you. Go there. There's plenty of resources there to help you. I'm also going to put links in the description. Give me a few minutes to put that together after the show concludes. It takes a little bit to get those all up for you. But once I do, you can check there and possibly find answers to the questions that you might have. Let's see what else. Oh, Google Plus, obviously, Facebook and Twitter if you wish to connect with me socially. And I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Thank you for watching. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. I'll see you next year. Bye.